Freaks and Geeks is often remembered as one of the greatest television shows of all time, which makes its cancellation after just one season feel confusing and frustrating, even decades later. When the show premiered on NBC in 1999, it didn't look like a typical network hit. It was quiet, it was awkward, it didn't rely on big twists or glossy drama. Instead, it focused on small moments, social discomfort, and the emotional messiness of being a teenager. That very quality is what made it beloved, but it was also a major reason it was cancelled. The show was created by Paul Feig and executive produced by Judd Apatow, both of whom were still relatively unknown at the time. NBC did not fully understand what kind of show they had or how to market it. Freaks and Geeks was set in a Michigan high school in the early 1980s, but it was not a nostalgic fantasy. It didn't romanticize adolescence. Characters failed. They made bad choices. They embarrassed themselves. Episodes often ended without neat resolutions. This realism was risky for network television, especially at the end of the 1990s, when teen shows were becoming glossier and more dramatic. One of the biggest reasons for the cancellation was low ratings. Freaks and Geeks never found a large audience during its original run. NBC measured success through live viewership numbers, and the show simply did not perform well enough by those standards. But the ratings problem was not just about audience taste. It was also about how NBC handled the show. The network moved Freaks and Geeks around the schedule repeatedly. It aired in inconsistent time slots, making it difficult for viewers to know when to tune in. Some episodes were preempted or delayed due to sports broadcasts. Others were aired out of order. This disrupted the emotional continuity of the show and made it harder for new viewers to connect. Even worse, several episodes were not aired at all during the original broadcast. Viewers who loved the show could not reliably follow it, and viewers who might have discovered it never had the chance. Another issue was that Freaks and Geeks did not fit neatly into NBC's brand at the time. The network was known for big sitcoms and high-energy comedies. Shows like Friends and Seinfeld dominated the schedule. Freaks and Geeks was slower and more introspective. It didn't deliver punchlines every few seconds. Its humor came from discomfort and observation rather than jokes. Executives reportedly worried that it was too depressing, too quiet, and too real. They pushed for changes that would make the characters more likable and the stories more upbeat. Paul Feig resisted many of these notes because he believed the honesty of the show was its core strength. This created tension between the creative team and the network. NBC wanted a hit. The creators wanted authenticity. Those goals did not always align. The subject matter of Freaks and Geeks also made some executives uncomfortable. The show dealt with underage drinking, academic failure, family conflict, and social isolation. It portrayed teenagers making mistakes without immediately punishing them or turning those mistakes into lessons. That nuance was intentional, but it worried advertisers and network standards departments. NBC reportedly asked for storylines to be softened or removed. There was concern about how parents would react. At the time, television still operated under stricter expectations about morality and messaging, especially on broadcast networks. Freaks and Geeks refused to talk down to its audience, and that refusal came at a cost. Another major factor was the cost of production. Freaks and Geeks was not cheap. It used licensed music from the 1970s and 80s, which significantly increased expenses. The creators believed the music was essential to the authenticity of the show, and they were right. The soundtrack helped ground the series emotionally and culturally. But NBC saw the music budget as a liability, especially for a show that was not delivering strong ratings. When networks look at cancellation decisions, cost versus return matters a great deal. Freaks and Geeks was expensive and underperforming, which made it an easy target. The time period in which the show aired also worked against it. In the late 1990s, television executives were less patient with slow-building shows. There was little room for cult hits that grew gradually. Streaming did not exist yet, and DVD sales were not initially considered a major factor in success. If a show did not perform quickly, it was usually canceled. Freaks and Geeks needed time for word of mouth to spread, but the system did not allow for that. Ironically, once the show was released on DVD, it found a massive audience. People binged it. They recommended it passionately. That success came too late to save it. Casting also played an unexpected role. The cast of Freaks and Geeks was incredibly strong, but at the time they were all unknown. There were no established stars to draw viewers in. Networks often rely on recognizable faces to boost interest, especially for unconventional shows. Freaks and Geeks had none. What it did have was chemistry and depth, but those qualities are harder to market. NBC struggled to create promos that communicated what the show actually was. Was it a comedy, a drama, a teen show, a period piece? The answer was all of the above, which made it harder to sell to a mass audience. Another behind-the-scenes issue was internal changes at NBC. Executive leadership shifts can drastically affect a show's fate. New executives often want to make their mark by reshaping the schedule. Shows that are already struggling become expendable. Freaks and Geeks did not have powerful champions at the network willing to fight for it long term. Without that support, cancellation became almost inevitable. Even as critics praised the show, critical acclaim alone was not enough to save it. Critics loved Freaks and Geeks, but awards, buzz, and glowing reviews did not translate into immediate ratings. At the time, networks placed far more value on numbers than on long-term cultural impact. The irony is that Freaks and Geeks has arguably had more cultural influence than many shows that ran for years. It launched the careers of James Franco, Seth Rogen, Jason Segel, Linda Cardellini, Busy Phillips, and others. It shaped how later teen shows approached realism and emotional honesty. But none of that could be predicted in 2000. From NBC's perspective, Freaks and Geeks was a risk that did not pay off fast enough. The cancellation itself was messy. NBC announced the decision before all episodes had aired. Fans were angry and confused. There were attempts to save the show. Other networks were approached, but deals fell through. In the end, Freaks and Geeks ended with 18 episodes produced and only 15 aired during the original run. The final episode that viewers saw felt like a beginning rather than an ending, which only added to the heartbreak. The reason Freaks and Geeks still hurts is because it ended before it could change. It did not get worse. It did not overstay its welcome. It exists in a perfect, frozen state. It makes people wonder what could have become. But the same qualities that made it special also made it vulnerable. It was too honest for network television at the time. Too slow, too subtle, too expensive, and too hard to categorize. Freaks and Geeks was cancelled not because it failed creatively, but because it did not fit the system it was placed in. In hindsight, it feels like a show made for a different era, one where streaming and long-term engagement matter more than overnight success. That mismatch between art and industry is ultimately why Freaks and Geeks only lasted one season and why it's still talked about today. Like, comment, and subscribe for daily history and culture content.